Now we're moving on to the audio amp section of our arcade machine. Now you don't have to put these on yours so that they're showing on the front. It's just a nice added little bonus feature. The only reason why we're showing it to you is so that we can give you the full experience and see how this is actually done from behind the scenes and all that fun stuff. Now the parts that you see in front of you were machined on our CNC. I'm just showing it here as the example, as this is what we're trying to create from scratch by hand. So we do everything here CNC. It makes our lives so much easier when you're doing a multitude of these things to set up and stuff. As you'll find out, doing half this stuff takes a little bit longer to set up than it does for me to show you how to do it on actual video. That's why we cut in and out all the time. But I'm going to show you the two different types that we sell and or use on our machines. So this one here is our little Carpenter amp. It is a square amp. You can see how it goes there. It gives you your balance for treble and bass and your volume. It's power, it's LED. It has an RCA out on it and a 3.5 millimeter that comes off of the RCA into, say, computer, JAMA board, Raspberry Pi, anything like that, so you're good to go. And then it just has a barrel connector for your 12 volt DC in. All right, so the other one's the same way. It's just a totally different shape. That's where we have the one above here that we're showing you for the roundness. Now this one's a little more tricky to router out and stuff. But it works the exact same way, except for this one has treble, bass, and volume, and then it has a bass volume right by the power output there. There is no real LED on this except for little lights on the front that show that it's powered on, and it has a separate option for your subwoofer if you have one. We sell this one. We sell in kits, so we sell the sub and the speakers for it as well. And you can choose between a couple different speakers. The sub is what it is, and it comes with a power supply and comes with some extra lines and stuff too. Sorry about the little plug on there, but we got to do what we got to do. So what I want to show you here is, this is a little bit upside down. Bear with me for a second. This is what you're going to see on the outside of the cabinet, right? Now that you've seen the inside. This is going to come in, slide in here all nice and purty, right? So now you get it all flush. That's how you do it, right? So that's what it should look like in there. We've got probably just under 0.2 of an inch of wood left over on there. So we're gonna, people would normally plunge router this out. We're gonna actually just take the small little router and show you how that works and drop that in there, and then we're gonna cut our square. We're gonna do a square one for you for now, because that's probably the one that you're gonna go for, but the theory and practice behind this is exactly the same for both. What I would strongly suggest is buying the amp of your choice first, having it in hand, measure this out exactly. I will give schematics for both, but you should have the amp in front of you so that you can measure it out properly. You want to have your opening at least 1/8 of an inch smaller than the size of the face of your amp when you do this, so that when you bolt it in, it covers everything up. There's no gaps, there's no holes, there's no light coming through, that type of a thing. If you want to add some silicone or something in there as well before you put it in, you're more than welcome to do so. I would strongly suggest not doing that, but if you really want to seal it off and have it so there's no light and that type coming through, then you can use colored sealant and go from there. So we're going to move on to the piece here, and we'll show you it to you all set up, and we'll show you the process. So what you see here is basically our quick little setup that we're going to do a makeshift jig for our audio amp hole. Okay, so that's going to be the front part of the hole of our audio amp. That's going to show out on the front of the arcade machine, which you'll see us install afterward. But basically we're going to router this out in a two-step process using this palm router. All right, you can use a plunge router for this too if you have a little bit more of a skill set, and or if you have the tool to do so and you're comfortable with doing that, you can still use this technique to kind of get it done. So this is a really fast, simple way to make a jig for pretty much anything. We'll be doing this for our monitor cutouts and all that stuff too. Anytime we do any sort of manual dados, you're going to either use these cleats as guides, or we're going to actually do a makeshift jig. So the makeshift jig on this thing is going to be one of two ways. So we have a scrap scrap piece of wood that we have underneath here, obviously to save the table as well as to nail some stuff to and do all that fun stuff. If you don't want to do the add-on piece that we're going to do with all this stuff that's kicking around, you can actually just draw a square in your scrap piece, and you can take a jigsaw and cut it out, or however you want to cut that hole out, and then you can just drop your piece into it. Just make sure that your scrap piece is the same thickness as your piece that you're working with, okay? So the reason why we're doing this is we took some scrap pieces left over from our sheet that we used, and this is our amp piece that we cut out for our panel, and we are going to start placing these around the piece like this. So we'll take this out of the way. We're gonna just kind of put that in the middle when we're all said and done. We're gonna move some scraps as close and as tight as possible here. All right. And then we're going to bind this in. And so what we're going to do is nail these pieces as tight to this as possible while leaving it free, because we're going to have to flip it over. And then basically that's our jig. So we're going to center that nicely, and then we're going to put our cleats where they need to be for measurements, which we already have measured, but we'll do it all again. And then basically you're going to take your palm router, and we're going to follow our circle groove type deal to get our front cut first. And we only want to have it in the end about 1/8 of an inch thick on the front for the little bit that's going to be kind of holding back our audio amp and covering up the areas that we don't want to have seen. But you want to go probably about 3/8 of an inch or whatever deep, so that when we're cutting the other side out and cutting your bigger dado / hole, it'll just join up a lot easier and you don't have to hog through it too much. That'll be a 2-passer with this type of thing, where this one will be a single pass. So we're gonna set this up all nice and pretty, and we'll come back and you can see how we did it all. All right, we're gonna pin all this stuff together. To make this easier for ourselves, technically you can eyeball this. It doesn't have to be square or anything like that in a sense overall. But what we're gonna do to set it up nice for ourselves is just line the bottom of this up with our our scrap piece of wood here, so that we have a nice square way to start off here. As you can see, he's not putting in a lot of nails. It doesn't take a lot to hold this down. You'll see in a minute why part of the reason why we're doing this is so that we can clamp it down to the table. Because obviously safety first and so on. And try to get your cuts as straight as possible. That way you can get like nice square corners. This can be nice and tight. All right, so this is going to be square. It might not be centered in the center of our scrap piece, but which obviously it isn't, but it doesn't matter. Like I said, everything matters is off this square that we're cutting. So even if you had this kind of turned cockeyed and you didn't have it perfect, if you measure everything out right from your square lines that you have drawn before we made this jig, then you should be fine, because we're not measuring from the outside of this, we're measuring from the inside of our square hole, okay? So he's gonna kind of put these cleats in where we want them. So I'm gonna go away for a bit, we'll measure those out, and we'll come back and show you what it looks like. We are finishing up our little measuring and lineup on this. I just wanted to make note that yes, we are actually putting pins into our front panel piece. This is going to be the front nice side of this. There's no real way around this. Safety first, obviously. I'd rather pin into this and spend an extra 5 minutes kind of finishing it and prepping it later to make it look pretty, than to try to find a different way to do this that might take an extra 20 minutes to half an hour and or not be safe. So it's easier to do it this way, and repairing a couple pinholes in MDF or plywood really is not the end of the world, and you're gonna have to do it in other places anyway. So it's just an extra little bit, but we want to do as minimal damage to the wood as possible. Just wanted you guys to know that we are very aware that that's what we're doing. All right, so I also want to bring over here now is the router bit that we're going on here. You'll notice that that router bit has changed. We are using a 1/2 inch for the type of audio amp that we have now. You can use all the way down to a 1/4 inch. I wouldn't use anything smaller than that. If you want a radiused corner in your edges here, you don't want them to be super sharp, then it won't cover your radiused corners on your amp that we're doing. So if you see those, they're radiused, right? So it is probably about a 1/4 to 3/8. We're just going to do a 1/2 to make sure that we cover it nicely and everything's all good to go. It will cover these screw a little bit there, and it won't be a big deal. And then on the other side, we're probably going to use this same bit, but you can use up to that 3/4 inch router bit that we were using for the dados as well in the back. The only downside for our 3/4 inch bit is it isn't long enough, so we have to go and do 2 passes, so half the depth and then the full depth. We'll probably do the same on this anyway because these palm routers are kind of a pain that way, but yeah, it's all good. So we are going to give this a whirl. Be right back. All right, so we've adjusted the router on the bottom there to go about, I don't know, just over a 1/4 inch depth, because we're just trying to go in, like I said prior, 1/8 inch. So we're just going to try to double that so it makes it easier on the other side when we're dadoing that out. So we are ready to go. This is what happens. All right, if you have a chance to rewind this at all, maybe go back and watch how he's going around the corners. So what'll happen is he's actually taking this router, going down one direction, taking it out, and before dropping it in and doing it again, he turns it and goes the other direction. It's actually the opposite way. The reason for that is because our router is not perfectly square on our plate, if you can see that. Your palm router might have a square plate where it's even all the way around. Usually it's because this adjustment on the back. So from the 3 sides are equal, and then the actual back on there is a little bit of a different size. So you could probably do it 3 ways, but then you'd have to turn it for the 4th. It's easier to just turn it for each one, and then you're guaranteed in making sure that that's the way it is. All right, so we're gonna clean this up, and then what's gonna happen is we're gonna pull this out, okay? And then we're gonna flip this over, and we're going to draw out a different square that's obviously a little bit bigger to accommodate for our flange and the rest of this audio amp on the inside so that we can mount it safely and nicely inside there. All right, so we are going to flip this over and we'll show you the same procedure on the other side. So I want to start this off by saying that you may or may not want to do this second step or do the second side of this. If you have an amp like this with the flange on it like that, you're going to have to make some sort of groove for that flange. So this is our way of hiding that. I guess you could like grind it off or do whatever works for you, I guess. But as it sits for us, we just want to hide it in the back and then give the thickness of the wood about, I said 1/8 inch. And yeah, so you might have a different amp that doesn't need this double cut like this, but we're just trying to show you how this goes through, like the ones that we showed at the beginning of this video. That's how we do it with the CNC to hide a lot of these amps and some of the stuff that's in there. So you get a nice, nice pro finish on them. So it's kind of a little bit nice. So what I want to go over here is make sure that you have your center line in your hole for the back there, and then obviously you're going to go from right to left on that. We've kind of gone a little bit further or wider than the flanges on the for the amp itself, just to make sure. Now on the bottom we were unbelievably precise, so obviously you're looking at that a little bit like that. On the top, it doesn't matter how big you want to go. Obviously, you don't want to go past the wood itself, because then you're just cutting out all the material. You don't want to do that. So you want to keep as much of the material for its structural integrity as possible. You are putting a massive kind of weak spot in the front and a main spot of your arcade. And if you're doing it where we're putting it, other than that, you could put it wherever you want. You can do this on a profile if you like. These are just kind of examples to show you as a bench test, kind of an idea, so you can transform this technique into whatever you're actually going to use it for. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut out the rest of this bad boy. We're going to have to use the vacuum on it, so we might either fast forward or dumb the video down on this. If I'm a little shaky, it's because I'm doing both, but yeah, we will get started. All right, looks like you get 2 hand models for the price of 1. What we're going to do here is adjust our router bit, so you can see what he's doing there. So now we want to go to our maximum depth. So just in case I forgot to tell you, which I did in the beginning, we are only going halfway. I mentioned it earlier, so we can skip that part and go down to pass number 2. So here comes the vacuum, double hand model. All right, so as you can see, we broke through. We'll clean that up a little bit and get rid of all that dust there. There's a couple little kind of nicks and stuff in there. That's why we did the other side first, because that gives you the finish that you have in the front. And I know I didn't mention this, but if you do the front like that first and you mess it up, at least you know right out of the gate that you gotta do that instead of doing this part, flipping it over, and then screwing it up and having to go through this whole process all over again. Anyway. All right, so I've set this thing up again so that it's all cleaned out. You can kind of see what's going on here. One, you didn't see it on camera. I had to take off for a minute and went ahead without me here. We just chiseled out this 90 on here just because our measurement on our amplifier was pretty precise, so it'll fit there just nicely. You'll see in a minute. We also want to file out some other things if our radius is a little bit off. That's why I said you can go with a 1/4 inch radius or that. So it's up to you on how handsy you want to be on your project. If you want the tools to do all the work, or if you want to do some fine finishing on your own, depends on your skill set, on your confidence level. So what I wanted to talk about was this piece. So basically, I just wanted to go over the fact of the way we did things. It's pretty obvious to see it. Some people have a question about this because they just mind can't work backwards or whatever. But in the beginning, we went with a smaller hole at a 1/3 of the depth of our thing. So we went 1/4 of an inch, okay? So in that depth of 1/4 of an inch, we only wanted 1/8 of an inch, which is fine. So what we're doing is leaving a little bit of space for the debris and your dust and stuff to fill in that gap when we cut it on the other side. And then as you can see, we made the bigger hole just by another 1/16 of an inch on the top and on the bottom, just to cover a little bit of that fascia on your audio amp, okay? And then with this, we did a 2-depth or 2-pass plunge going 1/4 of an inch and then going a little more than 1/2 of an inch so that we can get through this, break through this little piece. That's why it looks frayed here and it's not all like, super sharp and stuff. The reason for that is because we didn't go that much further past it, okay? Because you don't want to just hammer right through it with routers and stuff. Just be as precise as you can if possible. You can go all the way through, but then you could also, damage the other stuff in there too by impacting and mashing debris and dust into those crevices from the other side. All right, so what we're gonna do is pop this off. Of course, one hand is not gonna work. She is tight, like a tiger. All right, so we are going to put this in, right? So you can see it's nice fit, and then you'll see what we have to do with it along the way here. So right now, if you're happy with that, you can leave it. You can move it a little bit side to side. It has a little bit of play. If you see a gap or anything like that where a little bit of light coming through, when you're all said and done, you can just use caulking or anything like that, colored caulking. You can buy some black stuff too, just a little tube or whatever from Home Depot. You can get white stuff and color it whatever you'd like if you want to do that. You can put like a rubber kind of a flange thing around there if you'd like as well. What we're going to do is we're actually going to file out just a little bit of these radius corners so it looks really, really nice, and those screws come out so that the fascia of the audio amp is flush. So we're going to be using a radius, like a round file, and we're just going to hit it nice and small, nice and smooth, and we'll show you the end product. So we're just doing a quick little file here. It's literally maybe 20 to 30 seconds per corner max. You're not spending more than a couple minutes on this part of it just to finish. If you are going to do something like this for your finishing, just make sure that you don't get too heavy-handed and too crazy with it, because you can always take away, but you can't add back, especially with something this thin. So, like I said, we're just making some adjustments for the screw holes that are on here. To get away from this, you could probably use a smaller bit. If you want to buy the exact size bit for the screws or for something like this on your audio amp, you can. You might not even have screws on the front of your audio amp, right? So it just depends on what you have. Everything's custom. It's all a custom fit. When we do this on the CNC, I use a smaller bit, so it'll just cut this perfectly. Doing it by hand, you're always going to run into some sort of situation, but for us, it just didn't make sense to go buy the exact size bit just for this video when I can show you kill two birds with one stone kind of a thing, where I can show you using a larger bit that's close and then just filing it down so you get to see a little finish work and stuff as well. All right, so that's all said and done in there. We will clean that up maybe a little bit with some sandpaper, make the lines a little bit cleaner, break the edges on the inside and stuff so they're not so sharp, and then your fingers and stuff like that won't get caught on it. And then once you paint all that and decal it, you won't even see any imperfections if there are any, and we'll go from there. So this is the audio amp cutout, and if you want to see how we cut out our LCD monitors and stuff to mount them as well, just move on to our monitor mounting videos and lessons, and we'll see you there. Moving on. So just so you're aware, I just want to do a quick summary on this here. So I know we say we clamp these down and this, that, and the other. We had them clamped down. I was holding them on the other side while we were doing the video. Also, this thing was made out of some scrap that we had that was 1-inch MDF, and it's like 24 by 36. So it's pretty heavy. It weighs about 40 plus pounds here, plus all the other stuff we're putting on it. So that wasn't going to move with our little palm router, but for you, depending on whatever you're going to use, you want to make it a little bit bigger so you can clamp it to the you can clamp it to your workspace or whatever so that it makes it nice and safe for you. So this is our final product. Already saw that fit and finish and all that kind of good stuff. You'll see all that and see us finish that and prime it, paint it, and decal it, all that stuff in the next modules. And you'll see us cut that and put a round edge and face on that and fit it to the cabinet and all that stuff, moving ahead here. But the thing I wanted to mention on this is you can do whatever you want at this point with your scrap piece, but if you're going to build more than one, or you're thinking you're not sure if you're going to build another one in the future, that type of a thing, instead of throwing this in the garbage, taking it apart and doing whatever, just label it with a Jiffy marker or something, say audio amp for whatever size cabinet or whatever it is you're doing, and then put this off to the side and keep it for later for another time, because these things do come in pretty handy. So if you want to keep that, sometimes you have a stack of them and stuff like that. I know I've had hundreds of them over the years, and then sometimes you just move on to a different style and do it a different way, but I still keep the old jigs just in case. So yeah, that's one way to keep them and keep on jigging. As you can see, I just wanted to show you here, we went and put that little ledge for our amplifier to fit on there. So now you can see how that all works in the back there. We do it in many different ways. This is just probably the easiest one for this situation. So there you go. And now you can see a finished deal.